All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us again today. I think we've got just an amazing topic to discuss, one that I think is really misunderstood. We're actually starting a new series that I'm affectionately calling the Painfully Honest series, of which discipline is the beginning of that series. I think a Denzel Washington quote captures a lot of the topics that we'll be discussing, from discipline to consistency to focus to commitment and all that over time. But today we're going to get our head around discipline, what it is, what it isn't, and then just a lot of big brain thinkers, including Dr. Hall, our guest today, about his thoughts on discipline. So with that, we'll introduce you. Dr. Hall is a business psychologist and executive coach, public speaker, and multi-time author, and we often get to talk about how we affectionately call him the neuro nerd, and how it is his understanding of biology and how it directly fits into the application or the execution phase of the things that we're learning. So with that, we'll bring Dr. Hall in and kind of get our head around what your thoughts are of discipline as a definition first, and then some of the details.
I'm not sure I've got a great definition, but I would argue that all of my successful clients are first, and all successful people are first and foremost disciplined thinkers,
Mm,
which means that they can monitor and manage their own thinking,
love it.
that they have figured out how to exert self-control over their thinking.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that's a great way to start the podcast. We do just a couple of housekeeping items here, real quick. And for those of you that I haven't met, my name is Jared Lee. I'm the associate broker and team lead here at My Home Connection, also referred to as MHC Realty. Our sponsor for today is the Perfect Real Estate Business, where we're bringing to the table a lot of very important aspects of your business, from business and life coaching, mentoring, and training, as well as other avenues to help you create a personalized business. So if you have questions and want to learn more about that, we'd be glad to help. But with that, let's chat a little bit more, kind of what the worldly definition of discipline is. I pulled the Merriam-Webster definition. I like yours a lot better because it speaks to, in my understanding that you've helped me with, is it starts in the mind first, which I don't know that this definition really does that very well.
Well, why don't you read it and we'll talk it through?
Yeah, so discipline is the self control that is gained by requiring that rules or orders be obeyed, and the ability to keep working at something that is difficult. Disciplinarians believe that such self control is of the utmost importance, and enforce a set of rules that aim to develop such behavior.
So this definition is actually, in my mind, confused the two parts of discipline, which you say in that next line: two types, self-discipline and imposed discipline. So the first line of this says discipline is the self-control, and then everything else is about how it's imposed on them by rules and order and structure, and that there is a disciplinarian, someone outside of you who's making you do something. And there is externally motivated discipline. My experience is that it is not nearly as long lasting as internal or self discipline.
Mm.
It's possible that a person can become self disciplined through the exercise of external discipline, but ultimately, great success is dependent on self discipline, self control.
So maybe this is going back way too far, but as a psychologist, I think you'll appreciate it. But as we're growing up, we're infants and toddlers, children, teenagers. Uh, I believe one of our core responsibilities as parents is to teach our children discipline. You, this is good behavior, this is bad behavior.
Uh-huh.
Um, is that kind of the beginning of where we start to learn that internal versus external, that locus of control, and where we get the discipline from?
I think the most important word in that whole sequence is the word no. And as soon as a parent uses the word no on a child, it is that parent then begins to set limits on the child's behavior and to discipline it. And I want to make the distinction before we go too much further between discipline and punishment. It can be the same activity, in some cases being used as discipline, and in other cases being used as punishment. And I'll give the example of a high school basketball team. Their coach makes them run suicides. Do you know what a suicide is?
Yeah, brutal.
It's brutal. So those of you who don't know basketball, running suicides is the team starts on the end line. They run out to the free throw line. They run back. Then they run to the top of the key, which is the top of the free throw line. And then they run back. Then they run to the half court, and then they run back. Then they run to the top of the key on the other side. Then they run back. Then they run to the free throw line on the other side of the court. Then they run back. Then they run to the other side, and then they run back. That's one suicide. And so
brutal.
That's called a suicide. It's probably politically incorrect to say that. That's what they were called when I was growing up. Now, why does a coach run that drill? Why does a coach run that drill? Because he hates his players? Because he thinks they're evil and bad? No, it's because he wants them to develop the endurance so that in the last 5 minutes of the game, his players have built up so much endurance through this suffering that they're able to have enough wind, have enough energy to finish the game strong. That's how they can ensure that they'll win the game. So it's an external pressure put on an individual or a group of individuals in order to get better performance. That's what discipline does. Punishment is you've done a bad thing, and here's a painful thing that I'm going to administer to you so that you don't do that bad thing again. So the coach, if somebody comes in late to practice, the coach may have that person run suicides. And in that case, it's a punishment. This is a painful thing I'm administering to you in order for you to remember not to do it again. If the coach does the same thing for a different purpose, it's a discipline. Do you see how the same behavior can be used for two different things? What parents do is they very often say, well, I don't want to punish my child because, sometimes suffering is good for children in order to discipline them. If we bubble wrap our kids and they never have any adversity, then they don't learn discipline. So the word no from a parent sets a limit, sets a boundary for a kid, and that's a discipline. No, you can't jump off of a cliff. No, whatever they say, no. What happens that in time, the child, if the discipline is reasonable and the parents are loving, the child then internalizes, oh, this loving person does this unpleasant thing to me. How do I integrate that? Oh, it must be for my own good. Here are the positive results. So they begin to internalize what they're doing. And then it becomes their own morality. There's a theorist named Herbert Kellman who said there are three stages of adopting a behavior or changing your attitude. The first is compliance, which is the parent says no, and the child, for fear of painful punishment, complies, even though they don't want to do it. So let's use seatbelts, for example. Johnny, buckle your seatbelt. If you don't, whatever bad consequence is
Take
going to
away
happen.
your phone these days. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I buy that as a good punishment, but that's a whole different topic. Then that's compliance. The second is identification. That at some point in the process, Johnny, wanting to gain the esteem of some other people, and in this case the parents, or in this case maybe some of the cool kids are wearing their seatbelts, or there's a cute girl that he's attracted to who's wearing her seatbelt, and so he does it to be among the cool kids or to be accepted. Kelman calls that identification. So there's compliance, then there's behavior change, to identification, and then finally to internalization. This is the right course of action. I believe that wearing my seatbelt is a really good idea. And we see that with parents. Johnny, don't touch the stove, or you'll get the hot stove, or you'll get a punishment. Johnny doesn't touch the hot stove because he wants to please his mom, or Johnny learns and identifies, this is really a bad idea. I think it's a good idea not to touch a hot stove. All of which are the process of going from external discipline to internal discipline. And well-formed adults all have at some point in their life become internally disciplined, internally self-controlled. And it usually happens before they go to kindergarten. Usually. Sometimes it takes the military, sometimes it takes prison, sometimes it takes a dramatic life event for young people to get self-discipline.
Now, is self-discipline it's a spectrum, right? You don't just all of a sudden convert from that to that now new I have discipline, right? You build upon discipline.
Absolutely.
You get better at discipline. So ideally you're internalizing that and you have the ability to find discipline. Is that fair?
Yeah, and if we look at habit formation, what people who are trying to exert self-discipline think, I'm going to change everything about my life. It's too many things to change at once. Just change one thing at a time. So exert self-discipline in one area. And Charles Duhigg, who is an author who talks about the power, his book's called The Power of Habit. He calls them keystone habits, which is you start one new habit, you become self-disciplined on that one habit, and then you build on that. And you can build a lot more once you get one thing changed. So the beautiful thing about human beings is we can change ourselves so long as we decide we're going to just change one thing at a time. And if we have a history of not being particularly self-disciplined, find one area where you're going to exert self-discipline and then move on from there. Famously, there's a person who is in my profession, Jordan Peterson. He's a lot more famous than me. I mean, his thing is make your bed, clean your room. That's starting in your own home, in your own place, that you start that self-discipline with the things right in front of you. And then once you get that becomes a keystone habit. Then you start to be disciplined and self-disciplined in other areas.
So I'm trying to remember exactly how you reference it, but it's the master skill.
The master skill is the delay of gratification,
which is you have to be disciplined with the delay of gratification.
That's the keystone to all of it. I mean, okay. To be able to tell yourself no, I'm going to say no now to something bigger and better later. That's the key to all success.
So I love that segue. So I did come up, found some quotes, and obviously these people have you talk about Jordan Peterson, but you talk about some other people that have, stood the test of time in history and clearly are big thinkers, or what are they?
Lincoln and Aristotle, sure, yeah.
Yeah, they're probably. My point is, people you should think about, consider what they're saying.
Yes, you don't have to listen to me, but listen to these guys.
Yeah, so clearly this is important, and so Abraham Lincoln, discipline is choosing between what you want now in what you want most. Doesn't that just speak exactly to what you're?
Yes, yes, and here's a guy who understood the delay of gratification. He grew up in poverty. He was born in a log cabin with a dirt floor. His mother died. He was raised by his stepmom. His father was kind of ambivalent toward him. I mean, this is a guy who experienced lots and lots of suffering early on, and he would borrow books, and he would walk 5 miles to borrow a book, and then 5 miles to return the book. Here's a guy who knew, hey, it would be a lot easier. It would be a lot easier if I just laid here and did nothing. But what he wanted most was to learn and to grow, and that was inculcated in him by his stepmom. By the way, if anybody ever tells you step parents aren't important, Lincoln is a fantastic example of how important they can be, because his stepmom was probably the reason he became what he became.
Wow.
But that's a story for another day. I mean, she inculcated in him the love of learning, and yeah. So he knew how to delay the quick pleasures now for the larger payoff later. And he was very good at that. And all successful people are very good at that. I mean, if you look at his life, it's a series of failure after failure after failure until he becomes president.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing for him to delay all that for something that will forever be in our history. Clearly, he delayed a lot for a very big outcome.
Well, and he was doing it while he was in office. I mean, he had these tremendous difficulties during the day, but what many people don't know is that his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, likely had obsessive compulsive hoarding disorder. And she was a very difficult person to live with. One of his sons died while he was in office. She became despondent. And one of the famous quotes is that during the day, Lincoln worked to keep the country together, and every evening worked to keep Mary Todd Lincoln together.
Wow.
And so he really didn't have any rest. So he was a guy who was so driven by a larger purpose that he put off lots and lots of immediate gratification.
Yeah. Wow. Powerful story, of which, we could definitely have more follow-on conversations about, because he's going to probably fit into a lot of the other topics that I just mentioned, the Painfully Honest series stuff. So here you get to through self-discipline comes freedom. Well, actually, you know what? I kind of want to come back around to that one, because I think that is the one of the most powerful things that comes from our discipline and the thought process, discipline thought process. But let's go to Mortimer Adler here. The true freedom is impossible without a mind made free by discipline. What is he saying here?
Well, everybody thinks that, if you don't have any discipline, that's when you're the most free. It's a huge lie. I mean, the Aristotle quote, the Adler quote really, really play well together, that you don't get freedom until you learn how to control yourself. There's a maybe not famous story about Malcolm X, who lived a pretty rough life until he was put in prison. And he said, I was never more free until I was in my cell. Because what happened is the external constraint made him start to look inside and made him learn and made him grow. And so the state exerted discipline on him, punishment in this case, but he took the punishment and turned it into discipline. Do you see how the story of it, whatever the purpose is, the activity can be the same. So the state meant it for punishment and perhaps discipline. Malcolm X took the punishment and turned it into discipline. And he became a reader, and he learned more. He wasn't complete in his activity. There was still a lot unhappiness and anger in Malcolm until late in his life, and unfortunately his life was taken from him when he had matured in his philosophy so that it was less angry and more focused, really at the very end of his life, on more compassion, which we don't really hear a lot about.
So this might be a very long topic, and I don't mean for it to be. Hopefully, it's just something we can touch on briefly here and maybe address further later. But in today's culture, it seems like everything is anti-discipline. It's do what you feel like you should do, what you want to do. You know, what does your heart tell you? You know, which sounds good, but isn't it anti-discipline?
Well, of course it is. Of course it is. So let's look at a field or a group of people. You'd think that artists and creative people were just going with their feeling, but your first quote's from Denzel Washington, one of the greatest living actors that we have. And all great actors know it isn't just about freedom and doing what you feel. It's doing the work of becoming good at your craft. Denzel's a great example of someone who's fantastic at his craft. And so there's this false belief that it's talent alone that, oh, well, Denzel, he's just so good looking and he's so talented. Well, talent is just table stakes. You only get to bet in the game if you come in with your ante. And you got to ante up with your table stakes. Denzel came in with good looks and talent, but he worked. That's why he's one of the greatest living actors.
If he didn't have the discipline, that would have only got him so far. Clearly, he is light years beyond most people because of the discipline that he had to bring with those other talents.
Well, let's look at basketball. One of the famous examples of a person who was all talent is Allen Iverson. He's a fantastic player, all talent. He might have had an even more spectacular career if he had had more practice discipline. And so you look at all of the greats, all of the A-level basketball players, they all had talent. They all added to it discipline, which is why they have even greater records than Allen Iverson. And that's not to say he wasn't a talented person, because clearly he was. It's that he didn't add to it the discipline.
Yeah, you've mentioned Jerry Rice on a previous episode before, but that guy, I think you said he enjoyed practice more than he did the game because he appreciated the discipline of practice and how it helped him execute in a game. That whole mindset is, kind of antithetical to most people's I'm ready for the big game. This guy's practicing and getting more pleasure out of that because he knows it gets them there.
It gets him there. And that's what makes for greatness is the belief that I'm going to put off sitting on my couch, eating Doritos, watching TV in order so that I can get something I want more, according to the Lincoln quote. And great performers in every area are disciplined in that way. It's not just sports, it's in every area. The clients I work with, they practice, they rehearse. If they're salespeople, they practice and rehearse their sales techniques with other salespeople. They role play interactions so that they can perform better. If I've got a company leader who's about to give a talk to his or her leadership team or the whole company, they practice and rehearse, and we work on it. They don't have to. They could just lay around, but they don't. That's why they're there, is because they keep practicing.
So just to wrap up that one thought, it just seems like culture teaching the YOLOs and the, do what your heart feels things is dangerous. I mean, I hate to use such a harsh word, but
I'll use a different word. It's stupid.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, it really is. Talent alone will only get you so far. And yes, of course, there's time for rest. There's time for recreation. There's time for relaxation. Of course, there's that recovery time. But if that's all you do, you'll never achieve what you could have achieved.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Well, there was a couple other quotes that I ran across here. Let's talk through Elbert Hubbard here. Self-discipline is the ability to make yourself do what you should do when you should do it, whether you feel like it or not.
So I have a little issue with the word should. I like everything else he's saying, but the word should. And I believe behind every ought, every should is a want or a desire.
Okay.
And so if you were to tell me, Roger, don't cross the street, you shouldn't cross the street against the light. There's a should in there.
Okay.
You shouldn't cross the street against the light. Why not? Well, there's a want behind there. And the want is you do not want to get hit by a car and die. So the moral imperative, should, ought, is almost always connected to a desire that is good. So it goes back to the Lincoln quote, what you want now from what you want most, what you desire most. So if I desire to sit on my couch and eat Doritos and watch The Price is Right, oh, okay. But if I want something more than that, then I'll say no to the Doritos and The Price is Right in order to get that better thing.
Interesting.
And Doritos aren't bad, and The Price is Right is not bad.
Just what do you want?
But it just depends on what you want. That's not what I want. I want something more.
Right. Love it. So Jim Rohn also said a couple things. He said discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Man, like if that, all these other things, if you're not in agreement that all these important people say discipline's important, this one's pretty cool in my opinion.
Yes. And I love that he uses the word goal, but I want to distinguish between a goal and a desire. And this is it's a somewhat tight definition. A goal is something that you want that requires no one else's cooperation.
You can personally do it all by your lonesome.
All by yourself.
Okay.
A goal is something that you want that requires no one else's cooperation. A desire is something you want that requires the cooperation of at least one other person.
So you could say it both ways. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishments, or between desires and accomplishments. But the distinction I think you're making is figure it out before you start to do it. If you're trying to do it on your own, that's different than if you're trying to do it with other people.
If you're trying to do it with other people, you will always be frustrated if you think a desire is a goal. I see this all the time where a person is at work and their boss gives them their annual goals. And so they've got to hit some sort of mark. Well, that mark is sometimes dependent on a coworker's activity. That's not a very good goal then. It's a great desire that these two will be able to work together and accomplish this thing. But if someone is being compensated on a desire, they're going to get frustrated if their coworker doesn't pull through.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I worked with a company where one person was dependent on the IT manager to institute a change in the IT process. And his bonus depended on him doing his part and the IT manager doing his part. He did his part, the IT manager did not, he didn't get the bonus. So it wasn't an annual goal, it was an annual desire.
And if you don't create that distinction, you could drive yourself crazy. Why didn't my goal happen when it wasn't a goal? It was a desire.
It was
and
a
you're going to
desire.
approach it different, right?
Right. And you're going to get frustrated. So let's look at let's look personally, and then we'll look at your business. So in your personal life, it's a wonderful desire to say have a happy marriage or a happy relationship. but it's a lousy goal.
Because it's just you can't do it by yourself.
It's me and somebody else. And so it's a desire I have. Now, I can, let's say in marriage, I can have a desire to have a happy marriage, but my goal is I must be a good husband. That's the only thing I can be in charge of. That's the only thing over which I have 100% control. Mm-hmm. I have no control over the quality of my marriage. I only have the control over the quality of what kind of husband I am. Happy marriage is dependent on me and my wife. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm tempted to ask a question, but I don't know if it's a rabbit hole. Well, I'll ask it real
like
quick.
That's ever stopped me.
Oh, yeah, true. Well, I'm also looking at the time here. Anyway,
I want to finish it. I want to finish it with your business.
Yeah.
So you want to be a great realtor. Yeah. Okay. That's a wonderful goal. But closing a deal is only a wonderful desire. It's a lousy goal. Mm. So if you want to close a deal on a house, who all's involved? The buyer, the seller, the seller's
inspector, title,
the inspector of the title. I mean, you have so little control. So it's a wonderful desire. The only goal you can have is what's my behavior? And so as we look at successful people, they measure, some people call it, they measure inputs, not outputs. Mm. They measure their success on what they call leading indicators, not trailing indicators. So a leading indicator is, did I make the phone calls? Did I connect with the inspector? Did I do my part with the appraiser? Did I do my part with the other realtor? Did I do my part with, the mortgage company? Did I all about what are the leading indicators? The trailing indicator on this is, did the deal close? Mm-hmm. You don't have any control on whether the deal closes. You only have the control over either what some people call your inputs or your leading indicators. Those are great goals, but they're lousy. I mean, but closing on the deal is a lousy goal. It's a great desire. It's what everybody wants. Do you see the distinction I'm making here?
Yeah, and I love it. I think, I'm being a little hyperbolic, but keeping your sanity, because if you don't differentiate that and things are successful or aren't, let's say they aren't, and you take ownership of things that are out of your control because it's a goal in your mind, and not taking into account that this is a desire with other people that you don't have any control over, you have influence over, like, you give yourself some grace because a hiccup came that wasn't because of any fault of yours.
Right.
It just happened, and go, okay, let's adjust that person as a contributor to this desire. Drop the ball. Well, let's pick it up and continue running down the field. I can't get frustrated at myself for what they did or didn't do.
Right. But what you can do is say, okay, is there some way I could have had greater influence next time? Is there a step I can add to my responsibilities in order so that this ball doesn't drop next time? I talked to a realtor once, and she was at a closing, and they said, well, do you have your down payment? And they go, it'll be here. And everybody's there. They're at the title agency. Everybody's at the closing. They go, well, do you have your check? And they said, it'll be here. And so they wait, and they go, well, is the person going to bring it? And they go, yeah. And they go, who will that be? And they go, we don't know. And they go, what do you mean you don't know? Well, we've been praying about that God would provide us the down payment, and we just believe it'll be here. And they go, wait. So you don't have the money? No. But God will provide. And so they have all these people waiting for the down payment. Now, I don't think anybody in the whole mix could have anticipated that a person who said they had the down payment was waiting for God to miraculously deliver it.
Right.
But maybe you might want to think about that next time. It's like, oh, okay, so knowing that this could happen, do you know where the money is coming from? And what's the mechanism by which God is going to provide this down payment?
Right. Two different things.
So you learn that for the next time. You couldn't have you couldn't have foreseen this time, but next time you will.
You're going to ask some detailed questions
Yeah.
because it never occurred to you that, yeah. Oh, man. That's an interesting
The
story.
angels did not show up with the check.
That we need to have an episode on because I just had somebody, how much detail should I give here? But give a verbal offer. Anyway, that's a whole different discussion, but it's in line with what we were talking about. So let's talk about this other. I'm pretty sure it was another Jim Rohn quote here. The fact is, self-discipline is only punishment when imposed by someone else, which I find interesting, and maybe I'm wrong, but self-discipline isn't that exterior influence, it's you. So are you punishing yourself? And I think you kind of spoke to this a little bit ago.
I think so. I mean, I would quibble with Jim Rohn. I mean, Jim Rohn, I've learned so much from him. I don't want to take away from him, but I would quibble with him for this piece of it, that self-discipline happens when you internalize and you begin to believe, okay, there's something important that I want and I'm going to pursue it, and I'm going to tell myself no now for something else later, yes. And punishment and discipline can be the same behavior. It's just the purpose. What's the purpose? What's the outcome you want? To make somebody feel bad? To exact some revenge? Or to produce some good?
Yeah.
And again, it can be the same. It can be the same behavior. It can be the same unpleasant event.
Okay, so we cleared our 30 minutes as we usually do. That's kind of the beginning of the end. We're just starting to wrap up here. But is it fair to say that the takeaway should be, if you don't understand what discipline is, you should absolutely at least know what it is, and look to very important people that have spoke to discipline to say it needs to be a major consideration in how you live your life, if you have it, if you don't. And then where does that discipline come from? Is it something you're going to choose to live your life by people imposing discipline on you? Or are you going to get the freedom that you're going to have by having self-imposed freedom? Is that a fair summary, or you could probably do a lot better?
I don't know if I could do better, but I'll take a different angle on it. If you can't discipline yourself, someone else will.
Oh, ouch. There you go. What do you want?
If I can't discipline myself as I'm going down the highway to stay under the speed limit, eventually, maybe not right now, but eventually someone else will. The police, I'll wrap my car around a tree. Someone else will. And so successful people have learned that they like, and again, this is freedom comes from self-discipline. If I discipline myself, I can be left alone. I can pursue what I want because I've learned how to regulate myself.
I always wondered about my comment for people that I didn't think discipline their children. My thought was, if you're not disciplining them now, somebody's going to discipline them later in life, whether it's the police or the prison guard or, I'm being a little, hyperbolic about that, but
that's the outcome.
Yeah. So
that's the outcome. Yeah. And I, one of the things I've missed about a generation of parenting, and I've been wrong about it, is I figured eventually bad parenting would be corrected by employers. Employers would not put up with subpar behavior. But I hadn't thought the same people who are parents are also the employers. And so the same philosophy rules in the employment setting. So I think what's happening is it's just delaying the inevitable consequence. And so I make this distinction between logical and natural consequences. So when my kids are little, if they run in the street, the logical consequence is they have to go sit on the porch and they can't play anymore. That's the logical consequence. It's not at all sitting on the porch is only related to running in the street because I made the rule. The natural consequence of them running in the street is they get hit by a car and are dead. And so what logical consequences do is they're unpleasant, but they prevent the natural consequence. So we've had parents putting off the natural consequence because, or what they've been doing is they've been not creating a logical consequence. There's been no discipline.
Okay.
And I figured at some point, the natural consequence was eventually going to catch up in employment.
Right.
Now employers are not establishing natural consequences or logical consequences. So eventually there will be some other negative outcome for people who have not learned to control themselves. And it will be worse.
Yeah, you're not going to avoid it. It's not if, but when.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm a little kid. I'm riding on my bike. I just got my training wheels off, and I'm riding pretty fast, and I wipe out. Okay, what's happened? I've had a consequence. I've had a natural consequence. What have I learned from that? Oh, I'm going to regulate my speed until I become more confident and become more skilled at this. If I never fall off my bike until I'm doing 100 miles an hour, and that's the first time I fall, it's gonna be a heck of a natural consequence.
Probably fatal, yeah.
Yeah, so we want small failures to happen all throughout so people begin to self-regulate earlier on. And if we delay that self-regulation, if we delay any consequence, they don't know that they're going to get in trouble.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent.
I mean, it's like the guy in First Class who starts slapping Mike Tyson in the head. I don't know if have you seen this video?
No.
I mean, this is a guy who clearly has never, ever been in a fist fight, and he decides he's going to get drunk in First Class and start smacking on Mike Tyson. It doesn't end well for the other guy.
Oh, man. That's brutal.
I mean, if he'd ever been in a fist fight, he would know you don't want to do this, and you don't want to do it with Mike.
Right. You don't want to do it with anybody, let alone Mike. Yeah.
Let alone Mike, yes.
Yeah.
It's on the internet.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, wow. I hope Mike Tyson is not punished for this guy's stupid behavior.
Right. Yeah, what did you think was going to happen? Anyway. Well, again, a lot of good stuff. I'm super excited about continuing this series. I called it the, painful because, once you realize this stuff, you should take it as, this hurts, but let's get up and get going again. If you take it too lightly and you kind of dismiss it, I don't think you learn the lesson. So hence the title. So I'm excited about the next topics.
Fantastic. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, let's make sure everybody knows how to get in touch with you. What's the best way to reach out to you? And then what are the resources to have access to?
Yeah, they can check me out on my website, drrogerhall.com. On it, you can have access to my online course called Freak Out, Fear Less, Live More. You can find out about my books, The Expedition, Staying Happy, Being Productive, and DIY Brain. I've got a new book coming out soon called DIY Leader Brain.
Yeah, when's that one coming out, by the way?
Well, when I finish writing it, I'm a little more than halfway through. I've got all the chapters outlined. I just haven't finished. Putting it together.
Sorry, I got a little antsy. As you know, I've read your books multiple times, and I'm excited for this one to come out. So I was hoping, I guess, probably sooner than later. So.
I'm the rate limiting step here. I've got other work. I've got clients. I've got consultation work that I do, and it keeps me very, very busy. So I try to push this in whenever I can.
Yeah. Well, we'll certainly let everybody know when it's available, and we're excited to see it. So, all right. Well, thanks again, Dr. Hall. We appreciate your time and advice. And other than that, we'll just wish everybody a blessed one. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.